One thing that I find as someone who lives up in Derry, although I don't sound it, I am from Tyrone originally. Um, I find it not very nice that people not from Northern Ireland jump around and make a big scene about things changing and stand up on public platforms and say, if I'd have voted, if it had been 30 years ago, I wouldn't have voted for the Good Friday Agreement. I wish I'd never done it, that type of thing. It's not a very positive way of looking at things. Um, is there anywhere locally, is there anything other than institutes like the one that you work for that we should be looking to for this balancing view rather than relying on the local press or the local voices that seem to jump the loudest?
I actually wrote, thanks Greg for your question. So just on the polling, our polling is available on that website if you Google that. So we did a poll just after the deal was announced, and so we have a report there with several graphs included. So and if you want any more, just email me. I'll send you some.
Thank
I've
you.
got a lot of slides. So I wrote a piece there recently for Pivotal, which is a new well, not that new, but relatively new think tank in Northern Ireland, so independent policy-focused think tank. And my blog there for them was on why principles of democracy matter, why they're pivotal. It's a clever play on words. But essentially noting that in the British-Irish agreement that underpins the Good Friday Agreement, the Irish government and the British government restated their total commitment to the principles of democracy. And then I looked at the principles of democracy as have been defined by the Council of Europe, and it's very easy to see that on many of those we have fallen very short. And I suggest that part of that relates to a lack of use of evidence and allowance of critique, lack of use of information, and hence thinking that academic work and independent research and evidence generation is very important. So I don't know if that's relevant at all, but it's just a wee piece that sort of talks about that, because we do know that people don't tend to look for these sources. What we found in our polling when we asked people where they got information from on Brexit and the protocol, for many people it's political parties. And so, the influence of some well-known talk shows, etc. Because on those talk shows you have mainly politicians giving an interpretation of something, the protocol, the Windsor framework, the DUP deal, then people make their assessments based on that presentation of something rather than the detail or the actual nature of the thing itself. I don't think this is peculiar to Northern Ireland, but when
No.
you have such opposing and divisive interpretations, it's obviously then has long-term ramifications.
Something that interests me now that the Republican people are into the newly active system, how likely is it that there would be another referendum to unite the whole of Ireland?
Yes, so this is the big question, right? So Michelle O'Neill, when she became First Minister and she was asked specifically that question, she said United Ireland is within touching distance. And Mary Lou MacDonald, who's president of Sinn Féin and who may well be the next Taoiseach in Ireland, said she expects there to be a referendum within a decade. We don't know when such a referendum would be held because we don't know the conditions in which it would be required to be held. So we know that the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has to call a referendum if it looks likely that a majority would vote in favour of unification, but we don't know on what basis he would make the assessment of it being likely that there is such a majority. So would it be, Sinn Féin topping the polls in every election for so many years? By the way, it's topped the Assembly election and the local election polls. And so it'll be looking to do so in the Westminster election this year. So will it be that? Will it be, clear nationalist majority in the Assembly? Will it be demographics? As a sociologist, I hope it won't be. Would it be something else? Would it be public opinion polling? All of this. So we don't know. However, we do know that we know that there is change in that we see more rising expectation of Irish unification and an intensification of nationalist sentiment. And certainly we have seen a rise in those saying they want to see Irish unification. So those saying that they want Northern Ireland to stay in the UK is consistently under around 50% or less now. It's
right.
not
Yeah.
very much.
Would it make any difference if we went back into the EU to that situation? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because when we ask young people in particular about why would you want to see United Ireland, what would encourage you to vote for United Ireland, rejoining the EU is a very big reason.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so that's definitely been part of why you've seen rising expectation of and support for unification. One has been distrust of the British government and sort of disillusionment of what's happened the last few years, but the other is just the sense of wanting to be in the EU, and that sort of maybe people who wouldn't have thought of themselves as nationalist, or maybe would have thought themselves as unionist, if they're very strong pro Remain, we do see some of those people being attracted by the idea of unification.
Right.
Yeah. However, it's obviously people, we're all kind of aware of the risks of, voting in a referendum in which you don't have any sense of what, what the outcome would be, in the sense of what does Irish unification look like? Just like what does it mean to leave the EU? What would it mean to be part of
Yeah.
United?
I mean, it's a little bit worrying that I'm not sure about if this is correct, but if there was just more than 50% on unification, if it wasn't very much more than that, there's sort of, you think that you'd need to have definitely a strong vote for it.
This is a big debate. So according to the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, it just needs to be 50% plus one vote. It's literally just over. And that's very clear that that's the position. When anybody, but particularly nationalists, if they start saying they'd like to see a weighted majority, or like a bigger majority than that, maybe, I don't know, a certain 58 or 50, whatever it might be, and then they begin to get into trouble, because people are very clear it just 50% plus one. And the interesting thing is, if it was 50% plus one to remain in the UK, there couldn't be another vote on Irish unification for 7 years.
Right.
Yeah, that's in the terms of the agreement. So yeah, but if they won it, if nationalists won and became United Ireland, then that's it. There's no sort of so yeah, I think really, if everybody spoke frankly, they'd say yes, you'd need a sizable majority for stability if you're wanting to see stability. But yeah, in the terms of it, it's just 50% plus one.
Following on from that, we were both at the event where Paul spoke later in the afternoon, who's a chemist, and he started the afternoon by saying that I don't know what all the fuss is about Brexit, because it was 52-48 and it was not decisive, following the point that Katy's raised. And he said in Ireland we have a referendum every 3 weeks, and in Switzerland it's every week. That was a bit, he didn't say every week, but he said, we have frequent referendums and we work on the principle we keep having them until we get the result we desire, which was a nice way to open up the session, a jokey way to do it. But taking that seriously, my little metric, which I've shared with Greg, who's on here from Northern Ireland, is if we had a set of scales, and in one side we put the economic benefits of trade north to south in the scales, along with the social benefits of collaboration in one side of the scales, it is the question I did ask you at the thing, Katie. Actually, it's not that I have a set question, but I think it's worth repeating here. So we put economic trade cooperation in one side and social collaboration and that north-south in one side of the scales, and then we put politics and or religion, which in my view is the same thing, in the other sides of the scales. If the benefits of the economics and the social is much greater than the politics and or the religion, then reunification becomes inevitable. But then the downside of that is the politics and or the religion usually weigh heavier than the economics and the collaboration. So I wonder if you wanted to riff off of that at all, or maybe it's a bit too hot. But that's my view. When and is a different matter altogether.
I think I will try and answer that by saying what we have in Northern Ireland is some people, so strong unionists, strong nationalists who won't change. You know, it doesn't matter if it'll be economic disaster to have Irish unity. Some people will vote for it anyway.
Yes.
Similarly, you know, so on unionism, like they don't, you know, the bread and butter thing doesn't matter. It's the principle of it. So you do have people on both sides or opposing sides in that view. But I think, I mean, clearly we see the plurality of people are neither unionist nor nationalist. And interestingly, even those who are sort of softer unionists, softer nationalists, they would place constitutional status and constitutional future way down their list of priorities. So we've seen this in our most recent polling, that it's really in the bottom three for them. And you know, all of the things that matter for most, like the health service, public service delivery, education, etc., the economy, all of those are way up. I think, you know, this is why Brexit has been so messy, because it's brought in those politics and ideology into it's made the everything very murky when it comes to thinking about very complicated matters such in relation to trade and economic cooperation. And we see that in Safeguarding the Union command paper, where it talks about the all Ireland economy as a divisive notion. It's not a notion at all. It's a fact. And similarly, like the gravity model of trade, as if it's something, you know, I don't know, designed to be provocative. But of course, it's not. It's sort of evidence-based analysis. So, yeah, I think when it comes to questions of Irish unification and in a potential border poll, you do see a sizable portion of the population will say, well, we'll judge it on the basis of what we know, and everybody on all sides say, you know, we have to learn from the Brexit referendum.
You kind of cited the Dark Money book. Sorry, I'd forgotten how you pronounce his surname. Could you say it for me again?
Gagan.
Which was, as I said, very interesting about the way money was being channeled into those votes for leave through the DUP, and as a process we've still not got to the bottom of. Do you think there are Russian connections of the DUP?
What a question, Gavin, especially when I'm being recorded. I don't know. I mean, Peter's book got so far, obviously, but we know there's still such a lot to be exposed. I mean, Carol Cadwallader did a lot, but there's still a lot more to come out, I'm sure of it. And you know, it is particularly worrying when you see political parties across Europe and further afield even being influenced by money and other interests. You know, that's concerning for all of us. So yeah, Peter's is certainly the best book that I've read, investigating all of that. And I know through Open Democracy, they're still doing a lot of that work as well to sort of uncover those connections that spread into the US and as well as into wider Europe.